Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Eki Yandel, and as Derek mentioned, this is a session that's specific to Oregon public universities and our respective test optional admission policies. So the way that we've structured this session is that you'll hear brief talking points from each of us that help to provide some context as to how test scores play a role in our admission policies, if at all. And we'll kind of cover that individually. We'll spend a couple of minutes talking about each of the respective institutions, and we'll take some time to address the questions posted to Q&A throughout our time. So don't hesitate to post them at any point at which you think of a question, get it in there, and then we'll work to answer those as we go through the presentation itself. And each of us will introduce ourselves as we introduce our institutions. So with that said, I think we'll go ahead and start, and I'm going to pass the presentation over to my colleague Genesis from Eastern Oregon.
Thank you so much, Eki, and thank you all for being here and sharing your evening with us. So my name is Genesis Meddards, and I'm the Director of Admissions at Eastern Oregon University. Most of my colleagues have really fancy virtual backgrounds. I was unable to load a virtual background today, so know that I'm with Eastern Oregon University, even though I just have a blank wall behind me. And so I am going to briefly share my screen. So at Eastern Oregon University, we're not only test optional, we're actually test blind for regular admission. So if a student attends an accredited high school or graduates with the GED, we do not use the SAT or ACTs at all. So we have some students who send them in, but they're not even considered at this point in the admissions decision. So rather than saying test optional, we're using test blind. The only exceptions to that are for students who are from schools outside of accredited high school or a GED. We still are requiring the SATs and the SAT2s for students who graduate from home schools or students who graduate from unaccredited high schools. So if you are working with students, or if you are a student who is graduating from an accredited high school or with a GED, no SATs are required or ACTs for admissions purposes. But again, if you are going to homeschool or an unaccredited high school, we do require the SATs and the SAT2 subjects test. So I briefly wanted to talk about what we do for scholarships. I was really excited that this presentation was today because as early as this week, or as late as this week, depending on how you're looking at it, we changed some of our policies at Eastern Oregon University. So, so we, on Monday, received approval to go test blind for all EOU scholarships and all EOU awards. So we don't have any scholarships that require the SAT or ACT. And then if you look at the final bullet points I have here, we have our foundation scholarship that many of you may know about, where students fill out the one application and they're in the pool for hundreds of scholarships. That requires an essay, but again, no SAT or ACTs. And then what's new this year on Monday is the last bullet point. So we don't require it for any of our merit-based awards or for any of our need-based awards. So if students have anywhere from a 4.0 to a 2.75, and we receive a transcript, we will award a merit or a need-based award just based off of the GPA. And I look forward to answering some of your questions at the end of the presentation. I am going to pass things off to my colleague at Oregon State University. Noah?
All right, I couldn't honestly remember how the alphabet went, so. All right, great. Let me share my screen and then I'll introduce myself here. Can't walk and chew gum at the same time. All right, I'm hoping you're seeing my one screen here. So my name is Noah Buckley. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Oregon State University, and I am at the Corvallis campus. You'll meet Brittany here shortly, who's at OSU Cascades. OSU, we have a test optional policy, and that test optional policy holds for admission for most scholarships, and I'll explain that, as well as our honors college selection. So basically, when a student applies, they will have the opportunity to tell us whether or not they want test scores to be considered, which can be a bit of a crapshoot, understandably. So we also want you to know that once you've applied, if testing site is canceled because of COVID, or you just decide that, hey, I don't think I did so well on that exam, you can always actually go in and change your status. So we're pretty flexible that way. But test optional just means, for us, means that if you provide a test score, we are going to consider that test score if it essentially boosts your status, right? So from an admission standpoint, if you scored low and you said you wanted us to look at your test score, if that were to make the difference between admitting you and not admitting you, we're just going to leave it out of the equation. So it really is kind of a no risk type scenario if you do provide the test score to begin with. But you do have that choice. And so it really advantages students who maybe have lower GPAs, but believe that they can do better on a standardized test. We, as the slide mentions, right, we're not going to say no or not award a scholarship that you would otherwise get if you had said, please don't look at my score. And it can only boost your case, icing on the cake, if you will, otherwise. Scholarships, specifically, so our general scholarships, our auto scholarships that we award at the time of admission will not take test scores into account and won't be required to be considered. But there are some like departmental level scholarships that are donor funded, where test scores haven't been essentially written out of those awards. So we have what's called scholar dollars, where students go in and look at all of these scholarships once they've applied. You'll be able to see in there which scholarships that you might want to apply to would require a test score, but there aren't a ton of those. And then lastly, I'll just mention our honors college. They actually, starting last year, got rid of the test score as part of the equation for admitting students, but they do a similar holistic approach where, if it did add value to the student's file and maybe push them to a yes, that they would look at that. You will see when you look at our requirements for our honors college that there's a GPA requirement or a test score requirement. So if students who don't meet the GPA requirement could meet the test score requirement. So if you're thinking about our honors college, you should probably just look at that, because that could be a situation where taking the exam, to score well enough to be considered might be helpful. And with that, I will be quiet and turn it over to Brittany at OSU Cascades.
Thank you, Noah. And can you stop sharing your screen too?
Sure can. There we go.
Hi there, my name is Brittany Preston. I'm the Director of Admission at Cascades, and it's always hard to follow Noah because he steals a lot of my thunder, because what you will find at OSU Cascades is we have the exact same policies as main campus. So everything Noah just covered is true for OSU Cascades. And we actually share an application with OSU Corvallis. So when you go to apply, you can actually indicate if you want to apply to OSU Cascades, Corvallis, or if you want to apply to both of us. But I do want to recognize everyone on this call. You are not going to be punished if you can't take an ACT or SAT. Here in Central Oregon, I've talked to some counselors and I've heard of students driving to Idaho to get a test. If you're looking at one of these Oregon universities, you do not need to do that. You're not going to be punished in any way. So similar to Corvallis, we're test optional for admission and most scholarship, as well as the honors college selection process. We also recommend when you're choosing to submit or not, I've had a lot of conversations with students of, it's up to you. It's a personal choice. If you're really proud of those scores, go ahead and submit them. If you're embarrassed by those scores or you're like, oh, I really could have done better, then don't submit them. It's a personal choice. And we also recognize that there's many of you out there that haven't had a chance to take an ACT or SAT. So when you're filling out the application, do not feel bad and select no, I don't want to submit scores, and we'll review you without those. Low scores will never disadvantage you. So if you thought your score was really great, but it's in a really low percentage, the admissions committee is not going to look at your application and be like, oh, why did they submit those? Now we're going to deny. It's only going to help you. So we will ignore it if it's a lower score. We're going to focus on your grades, your classes, your class choice. Did you take honors in AP or IB? How are your grade trends? I work with a lot of students who had a rocky start. So do not lose sleep tonight over test scores, and hopefully these presentations from all my colleagues will assure you that. But basically everything Noah said applies to OSU Cascades in Bend, Oregon. And I believe OIT is next.
Yes, hello there. Good evening. Thank you for attending tonight. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm the Director of Admissions with Oregon Institute of Technology. We're Oregon's Polytechnic University. So basically that means you're going to get a Bachelor of Science from Oregon Tech. So if you're into y=mx+b and the quadratic formula, we might be a good fit for you. Great engineering programs and health programs. For us, our admissions criteria are fairly unique in the sense that we look at your course progression and your GPA. Here, let's get that back. Let's see here. So it's we're looking at your 15 core subject requirements, 4 years of English, 4 years of math, and in particular, we really drill down on your math and lab science combos. So we really want to know what that course progression and the grades are there. We're also looking at a career in technical education or a fine art, and an academic elective. So that could be any of the subjects above. For Oregon Tech, we do not. We do accept test scores. They're fully optional in the sense that they will never penalize you. They will only enhance your chances for admission. And you'll see that we are also self-reported admission as well. A couple of years ago, we also went to GPA or test scores. So what we have here is you can have, for example, a 3.76 GPA, or if your equivalent test score is higher, you'd be eligible for the same award there. So in no way, shape, or form, our test score is going to penalize a student at Oregon Tech, and we do look at the course progression, especially around your subject requirements. What that means in general for about 60 to 70% of our students is your high school cumulative GPA tends to be about 1/4 to 1/2 point higher than your core GPA that we calculate in-house. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those for you. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump in real quick. Couple questions on the board. Is there a college where I can go with a 2.0 GPA and get in? That's for anyone.
I actually answered that question, but I think it's good for the group to hear. I think many on this call tonight, someone can speak up if it's different. Many of us require higher than that GPA. However, we all work with students on transfer plans. So I would reach out to the school that you're considering and be honest about your GPA, talk about should you apply or should you start at a community college, but we all set up a roadmap for you to get here. So it's never a closed door. It might be just getting some college coursework at a local community college under your belt.
Fantastic. Another quick question. Are Oregon students prioritized over out-of-state students for OSU?
No, there's not a priority one way or the other. We use the same process and requirements, if you will, for residents and non-residents.
What about O of U?
U of O.
And U of O,
Absolutely,
sorry.
very much the same answer as Noah gave. We don't make a distinction between in-state and out-of-state for admissions purposes. So not an issue.
Fantastic. All right. The next question, I'm going to kind of summarize it a little bit, but are the current practices of test optional policies, is this just for this year during COVID-19? I think they were asking because they had a daughter that's a freshman in high school, and it's probably going to be applying to that person.
I think I'll take that one. My suspicion, I think this is long-term. I think there might be some campuses that have made the statement that this will be evaluated for the class of 2021 and some decisions may be made in the spring for future years. But my suspicion, I think for all the, I could be wrong, for the Oregon publics, I think we're unified in terms of, I think this becomes a long-term approach to our admission policy, and I'll let my colleagues jump in if that is different, but I think that's my suspicion. Is this something that we've made this commitment moving forward and we'll stick to the test optional policy?
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah, I just echo what Rob said. I think this was a collective decision by all of us to recognize there are some potential biases with these exams, and that there are a lot of really valuable ways that we can glean how strong a student is and how well they'll do at each of our respective universities, and that we have ways to exercise that research that we've done on our own students who have enrolled, and we've chosen to do that as a collective making the decision. So.
Fantastic. Does the DPP program apply to each of these colleges?
So this is Noah at OSU. So the Degree Partnership Program, or DPP, is an OSU thing, but I think most schools have partnerships with, if not all the community colleges, with regional community colleges. So I'm not sure if that answers the question or if there was more to it, but.
Nope, that was it. Thanks. Is there a preference of GPA or test scores in the application process? Is there a preference?
For Oregon Tech, it's all about the core GPA that we calculate in-house. We don't look at the high school cumulative GPA, and the scores will only help out a student's chances for admission, but that's specific to Oregon Tech.
All right, for the pathway scholarship, is the GPA requirement looked at weighted? Is that weighted or is it unweighted?
That's a very University of Oregon specific question, which is where I'm from. I haven't even introduced myself yet,
Okay.
But we'll get to that when I present in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all the questions right now.
Great, I'll go ahead and share my screen. This is Eki again from Portland State University, and I think while I'm doing that, I'll also just address to the preference of GPA or test scores in applications. Respective to Portland State, we have a minimum GPA requirement that comes into play. So as long as you meet that minimum requirement, you are good to go with respect to being admitted to the university. So no real preference other than the 3.0 cumulative unweighted GPA. So I don't have a lot of new information after several of my colleagues have gone in terms of students needing or using test scores to be admitted to the university. Generally speaking, students do not need to submit test scores to us. They are really, as Noah at Oregon State mentioned, value added, if anything. They will not subtract from an application that you submit to us. So if a student meets our minimum admission requirements, which again refers to the core curriculum that Eric touched on briefly, and you are a student who is on track with a 3.0 cumulative unweighted GPA and attending a standard accredited high school, you'll be admitted to Portland State and you do not need to submit test scores to us. One thing that I would mention, if you in your application to Portland State mention that you've taken an exam and you put those scores into your application, we will request an official score report be sent to our institution. However, that won't prevent your application from moving forward to receive an admission decision. It will simply be a material that you need to submit to our institution prior to enrollment. There are a handful of situations where you may need to or may choose to submit test scores to us. Students who attend homeschool or non-accredited, non-standard high schools. Perhaps if your school is not uniformly vetted by an accrediting institution, or if you're at a school that doesn't confer traditional letter grades. So instead of giving A's through F letter grades, perhaps your institution, your high school, your secondary school issues written evaluations. In those situations, there may be a request for test scores to help us better understand you as an applicant, but not always required. Oftentimes you end up going through holistic review with us. We also have a good amount of transfer students who come to Portland State, so it's important to note that those students who've been out of high school for 3 years prior to enrolling at Portland State, you will not be asked to submit test scores whatsoever. At the bottom of the slide here, there's just a couple of scenarios through which scores may be beneficial to you. If you choose, or if you go through holistic review, it is still your choice as to whether or not you want to submit test scores to us. And again, only value added. They will not subtract from your application for admission, but that is a material that you may choose to submit to help bolster your application for admission should your GPA be lower than you'd like it to be. In addition to that, applicants to our honors college may benefit from submitting test scores. Again, if you are a student whose GPA did not end up where you wanted it to be, you have the option to submit test scores to us, and similar to our colleagues at Oregon State, you may improve your chances of receiving a higher merit scholarship should you have test scores that demonstrate proficiencies that we couldn't see through your GPA. Perhaps things just didn't play out how you would have hoped in the classroom at times. And then lastly, if you're a student from Western Undergraduate Exchange State, you can qualify for Western Undergraduate Exchange either through your GPA or through test scores at Portland State University. So I'd say just keep that in mind. All that information and the deadlines that are associated with it can always be found on our website. But I think my colleagues have summed it up pretty well, so I'll cut it off right there. Next, I believe, Rob with Western.
Before Rob goes, I had a real quick question for you guys. For all the schools, does immigrant status matter?
Not, I'm unmiked, or I'm mic'd already. So not for the purpose of test optional admissions for us. No, not at Portland State.
Fantastic.
I think I'm up next, Eki, after you.
I'm going to defer to my colleague, Kelly, then.
Then we've got Jim after me. So
yeah, the alphabet's not easy.
Hang in there, Rob. All right, let me share my screen as well. So, okay, so hello everyone. Thanks so much for letting me be here this evening. It's a pleasure always to join my colleagues in presenting to all of you. And my name is Kelly Mount-Satz, and I'm Director of Admissions at Southern Oregon University. So again, great to be here. You know, SOU has historically required prospective students to submit standardized test scores, and we had explored the idea initially of becoming test optional, hadn't quite made the firm decision to do that, and then enter COVID-19. So yes, you know, as a response to the cancellation of ACT and College Board tests, I think that was the driving force behind it, but like Rob has already mentioned, I definitely think it's here to stay. Had a really great conversation with my VP and talking about this and some of the barriers that have been, you know, in place for so long. This was just kind of the necessary push to get us all to where we needed to be. So I'm thrilled with this. So naturally, you know, wanting to minimize all the barriers that were already caused by this horrific pandemic, we made the decision to do away with the test exam. And I think, you know, for families, they have such a tendency to place such a main focus on test scores when it comes to preparing for college. However, that obsession with test scores can often really take away from what I think is truly important, and that's, you know, grades, performance in college prep courses, students' interests, best fit, so many other things that's going to really help to determine a student's success. So at SOU, we admit students based on a holistic approach, and we can definitely and confidently make a thoughtful admission decision without test scores. That being said, I do want to emphasize what others have stated. We're not necessarily test blind because, like other institutions have already talked about, you know, if you're on the cusp of a GPA and you have a stellar test score, naturally that's something we would want to consider. But through that holistic process, it's certainly not going to hurt a student one way or the other. It will only help them. So that's kind of the silver lining. You've got a great SAT score or ACT score, there's your silver lining, but not a necessity. I think the only other entity on campus right now that still is really looking at SAT scores or ACT scores would be our Degree in 3 program. So the Accelerated Baccalaureate program, or for local students in our Jackson and Joseph counties, we have something called the Jack Joe Pledge. That is an area we'll still look at test scores, but it is a strong or. So if a student has a 3.2 GPA, they're done. We do not need test scores. But if their test scores help with that, and maybe they have a 3.0, then that's the one area that we'll continue to look at test scores. Our scholarships are blind to test scores. It is solely based on GPA, and I'm thrilled with that as well. So other than all of the things my wonderful colleagues have shared with you, we still are doing rolling admissions, meaning that a student can apply at any time and be admitted throughout the year, but we do encourage an early application naturally for scholarship purposes. So first step is still complete an online application, and then we would still encourage a student to submit additional documentation other than their GPA, of course. This is the first year we've allowed for self-reported GPA, but the stipulation to that is that a student has to provide us with an official transcript before they matriculate. Otherwise, a hold is placed on account. But again, just looking to remove as many barriers as we can and make a decision to assist our students and help them prepare for their academic journey. So I think that's pretty much it for Southern Oregon University's updates. An admissions decision usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks tops. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to Jim at U of O. Oh, let me stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Thanks very much, Kelly. We all tend to get good at this handoff at some point in the fall, but you can tell this is our first time doing it together this fall, right? We'll learn the alphabet eventually. Everyone, welcome. We're so glad you're here tonight. And all of us enjoy the chance to bring you information that certainly helps you understand distinctions between our campuses, but also I hope you're hearing loud and clear that we have a lot of shared values and a lot of shared care for wanting to give you as bearable as an experience as we can this year with all that's going on. And I'd even add to that, that it's great to see some of our juniors and younger students and families on here. And it's great that you're asking some things about what is or isn't different from this year right now. I think all of us would say we want to give you prediction and predictability, but check back in when you get a little further down the road and we'll kind of bring you along on things. So Jim Rollins again, Director of Admissions and Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management at the University of Oregon, if you couldn't tell, right? And some of the information I want to share with you tonight really covers a little bit of some of these questions that have also just been coming up in the general chats as well. So one of the things that I want to make clear is a permanent change that we decided to make before the pandemic is that the University of Oregon, and I was so thrilled to have pretty much unilateral support from my faculty, my board of trustees, my president and provost, is that we decided starting this year to no longer require test scores. And in that regard, for admissions I'm talking about, we have become test optional going forward as of 2021. This list of the things we consider in admissions is actually really no different than you would have heard from me last year, except for that word optional down there in the parentheses. One of the best kept or not so well kept secrets about our approach to admissions and what we think makes a student a good fit for our campus is that we've never thought of test scores as a huge factor, even when it was required. And that goes for even our honors college, whose dean was the first leader on campus to support my proposal that we go test optional, by the way. So these are the kind of array of things that we've always looked at and will continue to look at. We, like a few of the other institutions you're hearing from tonight, have made the switch as of this year to become a school that has you self-report your transcript. And so it's very important that when you apply, you do enter all that information in for us, not just a GPA, but the course by course information. And especially because we want to make more use of this information than ever before. That's going to really help us in some of our evaluative processes. We got over 28,000 applicants for the freshman class last year. And so sometimes we have to do some things that help us move more quickly through an unusually large applicant pool. So you can tell here that we look at a lot of things that range from your trends in your GPA, the courses you've been choosing to take. We always do a very careful job to make sure we know what is or isn't even available at your school before we judge you too much more on that. Even things like activities and work we know are different right now. So it's a different year for looking at that. But one way or another, I can emphasize that not only do you not need to send in scores, but I'm going to go in and say, we would really rather you not go take the test. Even beyond what Brittany said about we don't want you to drive to Idaho, even if you can find this nearby, we want to do everything we can to avoid you feeling the need to sit in a place where you're not so sure how things are being handled or any of those kinds of things that are adding worry right now. So I'm going to tell you that even though we are test optional for admissions, we really, really, truly don't need those scores. If you already took the test and you just cannot believe you would never turn them in to us, you can do that. But if you don't plan to turn in scores, all you have to do in the application is check a box right up front. And by the way, we take the Common App, the Coalition app, or have our own application. Any of those three will simply ask you up front, do you wish to be considered without test scores? And I do really need you to check that box as the one extra step we need you to do. And that way we simply know not to wait on those to look at your file. We fully expect most of our applicants will check that box this year. But if you don't, you can always come back and let us know, actually, I decided to go test optional, and we'll just kind of move things forward. There are a few very unusual things for which test scores are a possibility for you to satisfy a requirement. Some of the other campuses have been talking about things like homeschooling or unaccredited high schools. If you happen to be from one of those environments, we've always had those as requirements, but at least for this year, we've decided to make sure that none of those was an absolute requirement for you, versus we have other ways you can satisfy those requirements. The same even goes for if you're an international student who's needing to satisfy English proficiency. We have always required the TOEFL or the IELTS or the Duolingo test, but we would accept the ACT or SAT scores as a possible alternative. If you meet it that way, go ahead and turn those scores in. Don't go take one of the other tests, but otherwise, again, we really don't want you going to take one of those tests this year. One other thing I'll just kind of add to very briefly is that this is a basic idea of how we're handling our scholarships this year. And here's where I really want to make a distinction related to that great question Cameron asked earlier. Our plan for scholarships is, as of now, to be completely test blind, but so far only for this year. So right like it says at the top of the page here, for 2021 only so far, we have reconstructed all of our scholarship approaches so that even those that had a test score as an automatic part of things or a qualifier, they're gone. And what we really mean when we say test blind versus test optional is even if you turn scores in, they are not going to play into these awards. We had, as recently as a week ago, different requirements from the past in which a certain GPA test score combination gave you a certain award. Those are gone. So if you met those former criteria, sorry, we can't move all these things around, but this is the basic concept you can see. Our automatic awards for Oregon residents, the Summit and the Apex, require a 3.9 or a 3.7. The other awards on here, except for Pathway, which I'll come back to in a second, they have an asterisk next to the GPA. And so I want to make sure you know, as the slide says, these are scholarships for which there are additional application materials required. Stamps is the only one for which we require you to apply by our early action deadline of November the 1st. Anything else on here and any kind of admission to the university, to honors, to any program we have, equal consideration all the way through our deadline of January the 15th. But if you want stamps, it's got to come sooner. Those asterisk ones do require you to do something else that you'll do after you apply. And the Pathway Oregon one doesn't require anything extra. It's just a 3.4 and you must be Pell eligible. So those awards, some of which it sounds like some of you have heard about, are all for our Oregon residents. If we have any out-of-state students on here tonight, that would be great. And I can let you know that just as your tuition is different, the amounts and scholarships here are a little different. You can check our website for some details there. But last, I just want to come back to one other question somebody asked about weighted GPAs and confirm that one of the changes we have made this year that goes hand in hand with self-reported transcripts is that while we have always honored whatever high schools did to accept a weighted or unweighted GPA, especially now that GPAs are probably increasing in importance a little bit, we really felt the need to be more equitable in that. So one of the things we can assure we do by you self-reporting is be able to calculate a weighted GPA for you, even if you are at a high school that chooses or is disallowed from weighting. So the GPA here is going to be our own weighting. Again, you can talk with your UO admissions counselor or go to our website for more information about the details behind that. But we're really happy to bring this bit of balance forward in things.
Jim.
So I'll turn things over to Rob for our last school presentation of the evening. Rob from Western.
Jim,
And again,
before
thanks for
you
being
go,
here. I look forward to your Q&A.
Jim, before you go, quick question. There was a question on the board that asked, what does self-reporting your transcript involve?
Very basically, for a student to self-report their transcript, it's done as a part of the application in most cases. And if you're applying to the Common App or through the Coalition application, each of those platforms allow you to do this once for all the schools that want it. So you don't even have to do it over and over again. But you simply enter in your courses one by one, English, fall of 9th grade, A-, and so on, until you get that done. It takes a little bit of time, but not too long. And if you just go ahead and get in there soon and do it, you'll find it whizzes by. If you are using our application that we sometimes call the Oregon application, in that case, you'll submit an application without your self-reported transcript, and then you'll be sent a link to go to a form to fill that out.
Okay, fantastic.
And if you have any problems with it, you just let us know.
So what's the difference between the 3 different applications? Is one more favorable than the other one?
No, and as a matter of fact, that's a requirement we all have if we're a part of those applications. And several of us on this presentation, by the way, are members of the Common Application. But we're committed to making sure that these are simply options for you, not differences in how we will review things.
Fantastic. Last question for you, Jim. What is U of O's GPA for non-scholarship applicants?
We have no minimum GPA, and that's been true for a long time. Certainly a good GPA helps you. It's no coincidence that our main Apex automatic scholarship is at a 3.7, because that's about the average GPA of an incoming freshman at the University of Oregon. However, we routinely consider students at all kinds of levels below that. Certainly the lower your GPA is from there, the more we're going to need to see a lot of details going well. But we really, honestly, we have no official minimum GPA that we tend to publish.
Is there a separate application for the WUE?
That's a question for any of us to answer, and it might even be that the schools that offer the WUE scholarship would have different answers. So that's more of a panel thing, and we don't offer that scholarship.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'll turn that over to others.
I just responded directly to Mary Catherine. On behalf of Portland State, you're automatically considered for Western Undergraduate Exchange as a tuition benefit once, if and when you're admitted.
That's the same at Oregon State, who is a WUE school this year.
Also at Southern Oregon University.
Same as OSU Cascades.
Same at EOU.
For the STAMP scholarship, do you receive the essay questions, et cetera, after you apply, or where does the student find the STAMP scholarship application? You couldn't find it on the website, they said.
Yes, and again, that is a University of Oregon specific award through a foundation we participate in. So yes, after you apply for admission, any applicant is sent a link to do the scholarship portion of things, and you have a few more days past our deadline to do that. If you go to the university admissions.uoregon.edu page and simply type the word stamps in the search bar, I guarantee you that'll come up. But if I'm wrong, contact us.
Fantastic. We can go. We can keep moving.
All right, I'll take it over. Western Oregon University, Rob Fittner. Thank you folks for joining us tonight, joining you from beautiful, sunny Monmouth, Oregon, right? The virtual background, but on a more serious note, it's great to have you here this evening. Jumping into our admission policy, because I think really that is the a primary focus tonight. We do require a 3-point cumulative unweighted GPA. It's a starting point for Western. I want to really stress that as a starting point. And then I think some of my colleagues, I know it could vary, but I think we've all kind of stayed true to the completion of 15 academic units. So once again, there's some variation of that depending on the campus, but this is something that dates back to when there was the Oregon University system. So a little history lesson there. And with the 15 academic units, we look for a C- or better. However, something I really want to emphasize, and this is not necessarily just Western specific, but we know for many Oregonians, you were impacted in the spring with the sudden closure of schools and schools and districts moving to really a pass or no pass situation when it came to grading. And I think we're unified as the public universities in terms of recognizing a pass grade, working with students, in terms of you run in that situation that was really the spring of probably your junior year, now that you're a senior, and know, for, at least for Western, that we're willing to work with you in those 15 units, and for that not to be a barrier or for a student to say, well, maybe I shouldn't apply for admission. We don't want that to be the case. Now, if a student is below a 3-point GPA, test scores are something that we can look at. And I think once again, we've heard this from other campuses, that can be part of the review or conversation, but we can also look at a letter recommendation from a teacher, a counselor, something that can really speak to your academic ability and future success at Western. Or it can be a personal statement, a great opportunity for a student to maybe share a little background information if they have concerns about our admission requirements. I think I heard this from Jim saying, if from University of Oregon, if scores are sent in, we're happy to take a look at those. That's something we would not turn away a student that wants to turn in their scores to us. That's something we can look at. So really where we start with Western, once again, is a cumulative GPA, the 15 core units, C- or better, once again, pass graded, really where we're starting. And if we need more information to go through more of a comprehensive review, we're more than happy to do that. And when it comes to scholarships at Western, our Diversity Commitment Scholarship, that is a $6,000 renewable award. Test scores are not factored in. Our General Scholarship, that does require a separate application, and that will be opening November 1st. Deadline is March 1st. Scores are not considered, but a student's academic background, extracurricular activities, leadership service, that can be factored in. We know in this environment that makes it more challenging, and I think we can adopt accordingly. And then we do have our Presidential Scholarship. That name is not necessarily unique to Western Oregon. I feel like a lot of campuses have a Presidential Scholarship. And with our Presidential Scholarship, we're actually evaluating that as we speak. That's really with our president, Dr. Rex Fuller, and his cabinet is looking at that in terms of the test score piece, in terms of how we can move away from utilizing test scores and awarding based on other factors such as GPA. If you currently look at our policy, we start with a 3.5 cumulative GPA. Test scores are not factored in. That's a $1,000 4-year renewable award. However, we have some higher levels that we're looking at in terms of moving away from test scores and looking at other factors as well. So the best way to put it now is stay tuned, folks, that we'll have an update hopefully in the near future, similar to my colleague Genesis had from Eastern early this week. I think Western is moving in the same direction. I have included our link for our scholarship page, and that includes for new freshmen, transfer students as well, to see what our current policy is, knowing once again that things are subject to change. I also want to take this opportunity to share a new, what I describe as a fee remission opportunity for new freshmen or transfer students. It's called the WOO Award. I recognize the name is not overly creative, but this is a new opportunity for some of our high school colleagues who may be joining us tonight, or families that have looked at Western Oregon maybe with another student. Then we had our Campus Visit Award that we started that for the class of 2020. We had students visiting campus, and they were eligible to receive a one-time $1,000 award. Well, now that we're in this environment with the pandemic, the Western Oregon campus is not offering in-person visits at this point. So try to be strategic in terms of what can we offer new students as an opportunity. So the WOO Award is for 2021, whether it's entering freshmen or transfer students, that you are eligible, and you need to take the following steps. One is that you apply to Western Oregon by February 1st, so get your application in for fall 2021. You need to get your free application for federal student aid submitted to Western by February 1st, complete our general scholarship application, and that deadline is March 1st, and then attend either our fall preview day on November 14th, it'll be a virtual event, or our winter preview day in February. So you do need to take those 4 steps in terms of receiving consideration for the WOO Award. So that's a relatively new fee remission opportunity that we're offering. So that is the latest from Western Oregon University. I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that are specific to Western or for the panel in general. Thank you.
All right, I think that was the last of our presenters. Thank you guys so very much for providing a wealth of information to us tonight. Thank you. So to everyone who's joined, we're just asking if you have any questions. We have about 12 minutes left in the session. So we do have a question. It says, for juniors in high school, is there any scholarship or opportunities we can look out for or to take advantage of for any juniors?
Specific to Portland State, it really just depends. If you're a student who resides in Oregon, I would strongly recommend submitting the scholarship application that we have. It's essentially a portfolio of scholarships that a student might be considered for. If you're an out-of-state student asking that question for Portland State, the most valuable tuition benefit or scholarship that we provide is Western Undergraduate Exchange. And so I would just recommend becoming familiar with the criteria, the eligibility criteria that we have for that particular scholarship.
I think most of us have a database or a tool by which students, typically seniors, right, go in and they search scholarships that they might qualify for, and in some cases it provides the application. But there's in most cases, I think there's nothing wrong with a sophomore or a junior going in and looking at those scholarships and starting to make plans. Now, just know that sometimes they do change from year to year. So it's not a promise that it's available for you when it's time for you to graduate, but get in there and see what it takes to be competitive, particularly looking at some of those scholarships that may be unique to your particular major, right? So, because often those will be, participation in a competition that's, related to DECA, or, just as an example. So there are some things, some nuggets in there. I think if you do a little homework, that you could find your way onto at least scholarship consideration.
Fantastic.
Also, Derek, I just want to add, I may have misinterpreted that by taking it specifically per institution too. I think one of the things that I would just highlight, I know that at the very least, we make sure that there's a copy of at least, I think it's called the Ultimate Scholarship Book, which was updated as recent as 2021, which is several hundred pages worth of scholarship opportunities. And that's not state specific. Oftentimes they're for very unique attributes for students. So I would just say keep that in mind. But that happens to be one of the most robust scholarship catalogs that we keep in our office at Portland State, so students can peruse it when they visit and things like that.
I actually thought it was kind of neat that you two gave those different answers, because that's the right way to ask the question, is just really know all those options that are out there. I think all of us that are telling you what we're doing this year and hoping it can be what you can expect next year for our own scholarships, again, this is really uncharted territory for us too. So more than most other years, we need you to bear with us, and we're sorry that leaves this a little less predictable than usual. But those external sources that are out there are not just search engines you can go to. It's not just the federal government and federal aid, but it's the Oregon State Aid Commission, and some great things you're going to have available to you there. So go after all of it, because it can all help.
And fill out your FAFSAs. Don't make assumptions. You may be eligible for grants that you're not aware of. So that's always a good thing.
Fantastic.
Derek, I had offered to answer one of our next questions live, if this is an okay time to jump in and do that, if it was specifically about U of O. Great.
Yes, gotcha.
So the question we got from someone about the difference in our applicant pool between early action and regular decision, I want to emphatically tell you there is no difference in your chances of admission. The only thing is that scholarship I told you about, our big one called the STAMP Scholarship. Anything else, honors admission, direct admission to our business program, any of the other things we do, the presidential scholarship, no difference whatsoever. If you were to look at who applies early action versus the rest of our pool, they tend to have a stronger GPA, those kinds of things in the past, but that says more about them than who we're after, just who's in the applicant pool. So mainly you should hear within this, if you're ready, sure, go ahead. It helps us spread out our workload. If you're not ready, take your time until you're ready.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I think there are some general questions, and I'll just ask those as we go. But one question is, if a person has a strong GPA but weak volunteer and leadership activities, how is that person viewed?
I think it may vary by campus. How I see with the Oregon Publics, I think for the most part, we're kind of looking at the core units GPA. I know the University of Oregon is going to look at a holistic review or approach, but I guess we don't want that to be an end-all be-all. The students, as I've had limited opportunities. So a great case in point, I was having a conversation with a senior last week. This is primarily what my focus has been: school and helping with my family's business. My family owns a business, and that's an expectation. And so saying from an admission standpoint, for Western, that doesn't have an impact. I think you're still going to be eligible for some scholarships, but we never want students to run out senior year, not that they can really do it in this environment, but try and overdo it in terms of trying to volunteer or burn the candle at both ends, thinking, okay, I got to rush out and do it senior year or at the end of my junior year. But I think if a student has a strong academic profile, I think they're going to be an excellent candidate for any of our campuses, is my general stance. And that I think there's still going to be some opportunities for scholarships, et cetera, but we don't want students to feel like they're to rush out and try and play catch up in terms of extracurricular activities or leadership service. Maybe if it's into their senior year, end of junior year, I think you have to do what's best for you and have that balance. That's very important.
Fantastic. All right. Roughly, what is the kind of the time frame between applying and hearing back about acceptance decisions?
I'll start with that one. At least with us, it can vary quite a bit. If you're a student who immediately stands out in our applicant pool, we're going to be more quick to say yes than if you don't. And there's no disgrace or anything like that in needing to hear a little bit longer. We have 2 notification deadlines in our process, even to let you know when you should hear by. And before that date, you don't need to worry at all. We just have to get through these as we can get to them.
For Oregon Tech, we average about 1 to 3 business days from when you submit, as long as you meet the guaranteed admission standard.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
For EOU, it's 5 business days after you submit.
And at OSU, very similar to U of O, we've got the 2 deadlines, but as just an FYI, our first decisions going out for applicants right now will have not yet begun. So
we're rolling admission at Portland State, but generally it takes several weeks, probably about 3 weeks or so, to get an admission decision turned around at this point.
Very good. Fantastic, fantastic. Another question: are IB credits still taken as the same year or previous year? Or IB credits still to be taken the same as previous years?
I think that's a general yes, we'd all agree, and that's actually a state-driven policy that we're all supposed to do the same thing with, I think. So we did make a shift. I think it took effect this year, but Noah will remind us because he was on that committee. Starting this year, students who get a 4 or better on the higher level or standard level exams of IB will be able to get credit related to that. There's also some bonuses that kick in with some of us for full diploma recipients. But just in general, yes, we continue to honor that. Is there anything to add to that, everyone?
Well, where this may be coming from is, this year the way that the IB org came up with the score was different, right? They relied on the teachers and work done.
Scores, that's right.
Yeah, right. So I don't think that's, well, I haven't heard, if they do that again, we will all have to revisit if we would do that, but chances are yes. I mean, we already made that decision once, but hopefully everybody can take their exams. We'll take the scores, and Jim's right. We now all award at a score of 4 or higher.
That's a great example, by the way, of a question that we should also tell you. If you're from a school where you're doing IB and you want to learn more about this, I encourage you to work with your school counselor. who often knows even more details and can help us get back to you with any subtleties that you might need to hear about after tonight.
All right, sounds great. All right, I guess it's a general question to all. Will living on campus be mandatory in fall 2021?
That's a great question. And I think I'll have to continue to look at my crystal ball to see. And you know, I think we can give you just a direct answer right now, but I think that is still up in the air. And I know it's different by campus. And so as an example for Western, I think we tried to be very flexible with our live-on policy for first-time freshmen. And really what I think it came down to is, what is your comfort level as a new student or as a continuing student? And I think for students and their families, they really appreciated that support. So we made some changes in terms of just the radius, in terms of student, if they live within a certain radius, whether they have to live on campus or not. If they're online only, that was just a given that they could be living off campus. But I think what's very important is to give that opportunity for students that did want to live on campus, to give them that opportunity and do it in a safe way for the students. And so I think for the group that we have on campus, that they're making the most of it, they're enjoying their experience. It is a little bit different, but I think for 2021, I think we'll have to continue to evaluate as time progresses in terms of what that will look like for our respective housing policies.
Portland State, you will not be required to live on campus 2021.
University of Oregon has generally been requiring freshmen to live on campus the last few years, but we definitely let off that requirement some this year. Even then, about 3/4 of our freshmen chose to live on campus. We probably had some of the strictest rules in the country to do so, from what I'm hearing, but they seem to have abided by them. And if it plays out well, that'll have a lot to do with our decisions going forward.
Fantastic. I think there's a question for Noah for OSU on there as well.
Well, I did press the wrong button. I was just going to answer it, but I said I would answer it live, and it was just about our average GPA for admission. And I think the average GPA of an incoming freshman is about a 3.6. But again, we admit students well below that. So
I think I was also trying to connect with you after the meeting.
Oh, no, somebody actually used my name in here. I better answer that one. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. You're good. You're good.
Noah.buckley@oregonState.edu.
No, I've got your cell number.
Thank you,
here.
Mom, for answering it. Yeah, I want to thank my mom for asking that question. Just joking. Noah.buckley@oregon.state.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think someone already asked this, but I'll ask it again. If you did badly on the AP exam, is it better or worse to send in the scores?
I'll give that one a shot. Sure, go ahead and send them. We don't even look at AP exam scores in our admissions process. We want to see how you did in the course. And certainly we hope you do well in the exam. But so many students, their AP exams aren't until their senior year anyway. We don't want to make you feel weird just because you happen to choose to take it in the junior year or younger. So at least with us, I'd say don't worry about those scores for admissions purposes. But if it's too low, it won't get you credit.
I'd use the phrase we used earlier, value added. For the scores themselves. To Jim's point, the rigor of the course experience throughout the course of the year is what most of us are looking at.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so the last one. Is IB better than AP?
I want to know if that's one of our school counselors who joined us tonight and threw that question out in the water.
Right, they're anonymous,
so they know better
so
than to ask us that question. You probably don't have a choice. So if you're at a school that has one, make the most of it. If you're at a school at the other, make the most of that. If you're at one of the very unusual schools that does both, see what you hear, see who the teachers are, and make a choice. We'll be thrilled with either one.
Fantastic. Western, real quick question for you. The time frame of applying and hearing back.
Yeah, I would say give us about 2 to 3 weeks would be the current time frame.